Hello. About a year ago, I rewatched the movie Love at First Bite. 1979 Dracula film, comedy. Um, George Hamilton played Dracula. I think he did a great job. Thing is, it was a comedy, so people don't think of him when they think of Draculas. But it got me thinking. So the beginning starts out in Transylvania, because that's where Dracula lived, and Dracula's being kicked out of his castle by the government because 1979 Transylvania, Eastern Europe, was run by the communists. So the government was kicking him out of his castle. They were going to make I think they said a gymnasium out of his castle, which is sort of the Eastern European word for a high school. So they weren't actually making a gym, they were making a state run school basically. But it just got me thinking, Transylvania was run by the communists for quite some time. Almost 100 years. Eh, closer to 75. But anyway, got to thinking of vampire movies based on this whole thing that the communists were running Transylvania, and how does that affect vampire movies? So I went online, looked up vampire movies, and there are a lot out there, over 100. I found a list of vampire movies. There are over 100 on the list. Had a little brief synopsis of them, so I went through and read some of those. An interesting thing coming out. So first things, there are Eastern and Western vampires, and so the Asian nations have their versions of vampires, and so we have to split between the two of them because they were less concerned about the communists. Well, how the communists affect things, and they weren't all Dracula based, and that's sort of what I noticed about the Eastern movies, or not the Eastern, the Western movies, is they tended to fall into this strange category of either they're based on the original book Dracula, or supposedly based on the original book Dracula, or they are a descendant of Dracula, and so it's still linked to it in some way, or it takes place sometime before communism. That seems to be the trend among Western, until the fall of communism, that was sort of the trend among Western vampire movies. There are a few examples. The Lost Boys came out before communism collapsed, and I don't know, sort of close to when communism did collapse, but a little before. So we've got a few variations on this, but for the most part, it seems like we gave up on vampire movies, or gave up on new vampire movies. Everything up until the collapse of communism was sort of you know, we got Dracula. It takes place in Transylvania. The communists are in charge. Can't do much with that. And so, vampire movies, or even a lot of almost any mainstream media, vampirism. It was sort of a everything's either Dracula related or it happened before Dracula or something like that. There were again other exceptions. Spider-Man villain Morbius or Morpheus was a vampire, but his was more of a, I don't know, disease type, I guess. That's not 100% accurate. I'd have to go back and read old comic books, but it wasn't your Dracula bit someone and bit someone else and bit someone else and eventually this guy gets bitten. It was different than that. It wasn't your standard vampirism. I guess in that sense we could say yes. There were some non-Dracula vampires prior to the fall of communism, but they were few and far between. I think Anne Rice, probably after the fall of communism, Anne Rice pretty much brought back the concept of vampires into mainstream media, and so we started doing it all again. I just, like I said, I found it interesting, especially in light of this. One movie came out where they said, look, the communists us actually controlled, Dracula's homeland, and I got to thinking, yeah, that sort of affected our entire outlook on vampires and how they were portrayed in the media, to where we didn't want to do anything new with them because it was like, I don't know, supporting communism in some people's minds, I guess. I don't know. Actually, I'm surprised nobody made a big, hey, Dracula's a communist. Let's make this a big deal and, propaganda based on it. Speaking of which, I heard one person say within communist Russia, it was illegal to make monster movies because they were afraid people were going to use, art to symbolize communism, and they were going to badmouth the state and stuff like that. So it was, at one point, it was illegal to make monster movies in the Soviet Union. You could make movies; it's just the state decided which movies you were allowed to make. Um, so that said, we bring back, vampire. We start trying to do new stuff with vampires, and another phenomenon that came up is we sort of decided to start changing vampires. At one point, you look back at people thought that Bram Stoker, when he wrote Dracula, they say, they act like he canonized vampires, and this is how vampires work, and if you can't reflect it from the book Dracula, then you're doing it wrong. And you can go back, you can go online and find arguments of what real vampires are like, and it's mostly supposedly based on Bram Stoker's writings, and mostly not. I'll probably do another video on vampires, sort of comparing his to other vampires of the time and showing this. But now that we've got, vampires have been mainstream, even though we haven't been doing new stuff with them. Now that we're allowed to do new stuff with them, people just started to get a little picky about the new stuff. It's become big. Okay, so you kill a vampire, you stake him to the heart. New thing, or actually old thing that's been revised, it's got to be an ashwood stake. Because supposedly the cross, the cross that Christ was crucified on was made of ashwood. Now, no one really knows this for sure, but that's supposedly. Now, look this up. In Russia, oddly enough, since we were just talking about them not allowing monster movies, in Russia, old folklore says that it took an ashwood stake to kill a vampire. They were like that was the only nation I could find which said that. Eastern Europe didn't really stick to that. Actually, a lot of Eastern Europe, you weren't killing the vampire with a stake. You were actually pinning him to the ground. You dig up his coffin, you pin him to the ground. He can't get up, and then since he can't get up, he can't feed, and eventually he'll just decay away like a corpse. So you weren't really killing him when you staked him down. You were actually just preventing him from feeding and hoping nature takes its course and kills him. But again, in modern day, people have either learned about this old Russian custom that it has to be an ashwood stake, or someone else made it. I saw this actually in another movie. They actually brought it up. So at first I thought that the movies made it up, but then I looked it up online, and apparently it was an old Russian tradition. But it is becoming more mainstream, among vampire lovers that, oh, no, you can't just stake him, you have to use an ashwood stake. And we're doing other things. Love at First Bite introduced the concept of if a vampire bites you 3 times, you turn into a vampire. Or in order to turn into a vampire, you have to be bitten 3 times. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything to you. Some people say no, that comes from Bram Stoker's book, and it doesn't really. I think Mina was bitten 3 times, but Lucy was actually bitten 4 times. So, you know, a vampire can feed on you, but um, it can also turn you right away. Or there is no set amount of times you have to be bitten in order to turn into a vampire. Go back to old European folklore, and anyone killed by a vampire would turn into a vampire. And so, there wasn't a set number of times you had to be bitten. Modern day, we've gotten it to vampires can choose to feed on you and not turn you, or they can turn you right away, or they can do, whatever. It's so again, like I said, with the return of vampirism in the mainstream, you know, the fall of communism, the rise of new vampires, however you want to phrase it. I'm never going to say it the same way twice during this video probably. People just started looking at what's the new way of doing things. I think there's also been some change just because we've had this whole idea of canonized vampire and this is how you kill them. People just trying to find new and different ways. Holy weapon. You go back to folklore and various, whether it's vampires or whether it's other monsters, holy weapons were always good about that. Of course, nowadays I can grab my phone and go online and www.imapriest.com and answer a few questions, and suddenly now I can bless a weapon. So holy weapons are going to go out. You're not going to see that as often nowadays because I can become a priest if I want, and I just pay the fee and I'm an internet priest and I can bless your weapon now, and that's too easy. So movies aren't going to be doing that anymore. Or now that I bring it up, movies are going to start dropping it more if they watch this video. I think the idea of the holy weapon will linger for a while, but since it's now becoming easier for just anyone can bless water, anyone can bless a weapon, anyone can holy water is going to start going out. I think because while in reality there is a specific way to make holy water, so you can't just get an internet priesthood and bless water. Movies have still sort of strewn away from that, and so the idea of a priest being able to bless any water. There was actually a method of blessing water which priest would have to do. So it's not like you can just go to the tap and bless tap water. There was actually steps to go through, but movies didn't quite always follow this, and so they'd use holy water. They'd allow priests to bless any water, but now that anyone can become a priest, they'll probably start dropping back on the holy water now, just because it's too easy. We don't want to make it too easy to kill our monster, so we've got to step it back. Certain kind of woods work. Only a certain type of water works, or a certain type of priest, or a certain type of whatever. So we are probably going to see as a because they're going to continue to make vampire movies, I think. And as they do, they are going to have to come up with harder and harder ways, especially in the modern age. Or we can just make it faith. Yes, I can go online and I can get my, priest certificate, but do I really believe or not? No, so it doesn't do any good. And as the world becomes less and less believing, then the old ways to kill vampires just don't work as well, simply because you took faith to kill them, and it's more than just the stake alone, or it's more than this. So that would actually be a very good way of changing the vampire lore. Is just yeah, all the old ways work, and we've all seen them in the movies, and anyone can do them. Well, no, not anyone after all. Only people with faith can do them. And, because the world, especially, you know, has started to turn its back on religion, then vampires are suddenly a threat again. Um, I don't know. That might not go over well with some people who go to movies, so they might not do that. But I think it would make a good plot for at least one movie. But anyway, that's it. Like I said, I was just curious about again the fact that as long as communism controlled Transylvania, we really didn't do much new with the vampires. And then once it fell, we started to do everything new. It was an interesting phenomenon. I thought I'd bring it up and talk about it a little bit, and then, as I do, ramble off onto other vampire subjects. That was it. Have a nice day.